Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome to another Monday morning office hours. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope you guys got out there, made some music, had some fun. But now we're here to answer your guys' questions. Today's just full-on Q&A. We had a big update last week. Version 1.1 is out. We now have track groups. We now have session versions and bookmarks. We have MIDI beat sync, tons of fixes, lots of user-generated feedback has gone into creating all these updates. So in that spirit, we're here to continue to help you guys answer any questions you have. So if you've got some Luna questions, if you've run into anything that you need some help with, drop it in the chat, and we'll do our best to get on everyone's questions as we can. But thankfully, I don't have to do this all alone because I got my good friends Drew and Matt with me. How you guys doing?
Good. Good morning, Ben.
Doing great. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Ben. Matt.
Nice. Right. So I'm gonna. We've got almost nothing on our plan for today because we figured you guys are gonna have so many good questions. But hopefully everyone's getting along well inside Luna 1.1. I've been playing around with it a bunch over the weekend, and also I had an incredible time last week hanging out with Fab and Che, getting to show off syncing Luna plus Ableton, syncing Luna plus MPC. And I think probably the one thing I walked away from, especially from Che's show, man, like, he's just such a awesome guy to like talk to, like so much knowledge and experience in producing and working with artists and creating songs. So if you missed that show, without a doubt, go check it out. And Fab show as well, being able to sync it up with Ableton, doing that all inside the box is really cool to be able to, produce in Ableton and then record inside of Luna and be able to work with the best of both worlds. But I know the one thing we didn't really get to in Che's program is we didn't really get to show the physical process of syncing the MPC, recording track by track, and how to kind of transfer your tracks from an MPC into Luna. But lucky for you guys, I've got an MPC sitting over here. So Thursday we're doing a deep dive again with this crew here. Thursday we've got planned a deep dive into all the different 1.1 features. We're gonna go over every aspect of them. And so as part of that program, when we get to the MIDI beat sync, I'll show you guys not only how to get the sync set up, but also kind of the process for exporting, recording tracks the way that Che was describing, where of course, with the newer machine, with Machine or MPC, the new software ones, you can drag and drop. You can take the audio and take the stems and drag them right into Luna if you want. But the real fun is when you come analog out of the MPC through a Unison preamp or even just a UAD plugin. Adding that SSL character is what Che was talking about. So yeah, we'll break down exactly how to do that on Thursday's show. Oh, and there's a Tuesday show. Almost forgot, guys. It's the final of Tales from the Switch. So we've been working.
Nice.
14, I think it's like the 15th episode, 14th.
Oh my
it's
God.
16th episode. We've done
Wow.
tons of Tales from the Switch. But any of you guys who've been watching along, we've been creating a song from scratch remotely. So now's the time to go binge watch all the Tales from the Switches before the season finale. I don't know what's gonna happen. It could be who's gonna get the rose.
It's a cliffhanger, you never
Total
know.
cliffhanger. No big surprises. We're gonna be mixing tomorrow with Fab in real time. The song he's been recording with Louis Cato and written by Will Knox with Spitfire strings all integrated together. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that mix session, which is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And that's all. That's the whole week of shows. So now we can get to the questions.
Yeah. So I got one. I'll kick it off, Ben. I got one from Max on Facebook is asking a pretty, technical question about sample rates. He started a song at 48K and then during the mix process switched to 44.1, maybe to lighten up the process, the CPU again.
Yeah.
And he's asking whether or not when it comes time to finishing your bounce, does he need to go back to 48K to basically maintain the integrity? And the answer is yeah. Like it's if that's what you really want, if that's a major goal. Luna does a really cool thing, and Connor talked about this in one of the early streams, but Luna's sample rate agnostic. So if you record at 44.1 and then you change the sample rate, what Luna will do is it will create the new sample. It'll real-time sample rate convert on the fly while rendering in the background. But if you ever switch back to the original sample rate, it will go back to using the original file. So it's not converting, reconverting. So Max, yeah, if you go back to 48K, it will go back to using the original 48K files that were created then. So that's a great question, though. Great question to kick off today.
And one of the use cases for that too, I've heard of a few people where they will record at 96. So tracking it in 96, let's go for it. And then stepping it down to 48 or 44 for mixing or editing, again, just to lighten things up. And then again, you can do the same, just as Drew described, you can bump it back up to 96 to do your final mix down, and it'll pull back the original sample rate files and allow you to keep export and finish your mix that way.
And there's the CPU and DSP issue, but there's also the latency issue. As the sample rate goes up, the latency goes down. So
it's counterintuitive, right? Like
it's counterintuitive.
Think, higher thing, but yeah, you're right. It does the latency from in to out gets cut, and it almost gets cut in half, right? When you go from 40 to 96.
Yeah, pretty much. It's easily testable. If it's just you, a mic, and a set of headphones, do your sample rate at 48K and talk through it, and then switch it to 96, and you'll feel that differential. You'll feel the difference in the delay between the bone conduction to your ear versus the mic through to the headphones. It's a pretty interesting little experiment to do.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Danielle says that we all get producer credits for Tails' final song. We'll negotiate. We'll check with the actual writers and producers on it, but maybe. But the good thing is, all joking aside, that song will be available as a Luna session. So after Fab's all finished up with it, we will make a version of it. It'll be included inside the app for you guys to all download and mix to your heart's content, or come up with your own string arrangement. It should be hopefully a really fun testbed for you guys to explore. Let's see.
Alex had a good question in the chat. Sorry, I had to switch my webcam mic, so sorry for the poor audio.
All good.
But so Alex is wondering, when he goes to the quantize settings and he selects a particular grid value in the quantize menu, while the grid lines in Luna in the main timeline don't update. And that's because those are two separate settings. You can quantize to one value, but the grid value is actually a separate setting. Ben, if you have Luna open, you can show that, because my system's being wonky right now.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we got a session here. So what we're describing here right now, I've got a MIDI track down here. So my grid, it's on 30 second note. That's insane. All right, let me bring it. So now my grid is on quarter notes. But if I go into here to quantize settings, the grid for your quantize is determined by the quantize option panel thing right here. What's it called?
Browser.
Technically? Browser. Quantize browser?
Quantize browser.
Yeah.
Quantize menu in the focus browser. Right.
There it is. 100% accuracy. So what you're quantizing to is always determined by this, whereas your bar beat grid out on your timeline is determined up here. So yeah, they're just two separate settings. Because in theory, a lot of times, I don't know about you guys, but I just kind of like find the quantize setting that I want to use for a session and then just leave it there. So 16th note, 22% swing, cool. That's my quantize for everything I'm going to do in the session. But when it comes to like editing files, like I'm often, I'm going between bars and beats to be able to move things around on a big level using the bar grid, or get in there a little bit more fine with the quarter note. Of course, there's a good shortcut for this if you guys don't already know. So of course you can come up here and select where you want your grid, but Shift minus and plus on your keyboard scrolls right through that list. So that's one of the ones I find myself using all of the time. Nice. Good question, Alex. How does virtual tracks work with Luna, and can they? They can. So virtual tracks, they work. Essentially what they are is they're a virtual input and output that you can see inside of other programs. Whether it's like your audio MIDI settings, like I know a lot of people will set up their system to send out through a virtual channel into console, and then that way you have a fader inside a console to control your system audio. But really the big key, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt or Drew, but the key to using virtual channels with Luna is just making sure you have it set up in your I.O. So coming here to settings, I.O. matrix, and you'll see at the very bottom of mine, I only really use one virtual at a time. This is actually used for doing these shows. I'll send the output of Zoom into a virtual channel, so that way I can monitor it just in my headphones and not through my speakers. So yeah, just having a virtual channel, for me, it seems to always work better when they're lined up like this. Sometimes I'll see an IO where you'll have the input on one channel and the output on a different channel. Maybe it's just me being OCD and lining these up, but I do like to have them right across from each other. I think the big key to note, right, is that when you're using instrument tracks in Luna and you put them in ARM mode, they're going to they're kind of using the same resources as your virtual channels. So if you don't have enough virtual channels assigned, which you can select on most Apollos, you'll have the option right here under hardware to switch between channel DSP pairing or virtual channels. if if say you have this all on DSP pairs and no virtual channels, in theory you can run out of ARM resources for instrument tracks. So it's important to find a good balance between these two. Anything I'm missing on that, Matt?
Just to kind of expand on what you said, if you are routing something to a specific pair of virtual channels and you want to make sure that those virtual channels don't get grabbed by Luna when you arm a track, make sure you isolate those tracks or those channels in console.
Yep.
That way, when you do record arm any virtual instruments in Luna, it won't grab those tracks. It'll leave them alone.
Really, really good point. And yeah, luckily I've learned from Matt a long time ago. So I have that virtual channel I was showing you guys in my IO that shows up right here in my console app. And if you right click on it, you select isolate. And what that does is it says it forces console and Luna, it forces Luna to not touch that one, essentially, is what's going on here. So you can see also my microphone is also the other channel in my console that's isolated. Again, so no matter what I'm doing in Luna, this mic always has these settings and is always in the same spot, never getting overwritten by Luna.
Yeah, and you also want to, just to add to that, you also want to make sure. Sorry, gotta silence the phone. Also, I have found that if you're ever having issues with this, I always found that it's nice to create a custom IO that starts by defaulting, right? That's, because sometimes if you build a custom IO, and you've not, and you're only doing your ins and your outs, then you might neglect some of these virtuals and you'll store a custom setting that doesn't have enough virtuals. So I always found that default that and default it and then customize from there.
Yep. And there's been one or two cases where if you guys are getting some funkiness, if you're getting some scratching your head, I know this is supposed to be working but it's not working, there's been one or two times for me just going back and forth, going to default and kind of resetting the IO and then recalling my IO preset. It's fixed some weird head scratchy bugs I've run into in the past with my IO, with either virtual channels or parts of my IO not working as expected. So that's kind of like a real soft way to reset your IO inside of Luna and console. Nice. All right. Terrell Jones asking, I wonder if my audio dropout is from my external hard drive or Luna. Also, I had to keep on logging in every time with Luna and constantly disconnects from my Apollos. Interesting. All right, so audio dropouts can be caused by a bunch of different things, right? It could be the hard drive not being able to keep up. So if you're running this off like a spinning disk drive and you've got a lot of tracks all trying to feed at the same time, it could be the hard drive thing, and then a good easiest solution for that would be to grab an SSD drive, and they make 1 terabyte external SSDs that are fairly affordable these days. Having to log into Luna every time, I'm not sure exactly what causes it to remember or not remember the login thing, but Matt, are there any preferences or anything that he should try, trashing and then pulling Luna back up to maybe?
Yeah, if you go to our forums, if you go to uadforum.com and go to the Luna section, one of the stickies is telling you how to trash Luna prefs. And so it's super simple. There's only a few files to do, and definitely would encourage you to start there. If I'm understanding the question right, he's also saying it's disconnecting from Luna. So if you ever hear your Twin or your Apollo is connecting and reconnecting and its relays are firing, that means it might be losing communication with Luna and or console. And that is, I would definitely recommend trying a different cable, because it's amazing how often Thunderbolt cables, they're pretty complex little things, and they take some abuse, and it doesn't take much for them to potentially, lose some connections and so forth. So I definitely would recommend you try that. And I'm sure Matt might have a couple of other things to add.
Yeah, for dropouts, and especially if the relays are clicking, the host light's going off on the unit, anything like that, cable's the first thing I would check. If it's an Apollo unit, to doing a hardware reset's a good idea as well.
Yep. And check out a new cable, and then you can just search the knowledge base. You'll find there's articles about how to do hardware resets. That's kind of if you're down the line and you're still scratching your head, why is this dropping out all the time? Sometimes a hardware reset is required. And if you continue to have trouble, hit up customer support, and they'll walk you through and get you helped out there.
Yeah, if
Hey,
you actually search for whatever Apollo model you have plus basic troubleshooting, so like Apollo Twin basic troubleshooting, it'll pull up an article that has like 3 or 4 steps that are a really good way to start.
Nice.
Hey, Ben, Ron on the YouTube chat was asking about having dual windows. So
Mm-hmm.
in Luna, so he might not be aware of the command for new alternate window.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so if you want to give him a,
This is one of my favorite. I've got a dual monitor set up here. So what you can do in Luna is you can come in here, go Window, New Alternate Window. Of course, there's a shortcut for it. Command Shift equals New Alternate Window. What's cool about alternate windows is mine went up to my other screen as expected. As you'll see, it starts out it's a duplicate of the other screen in a sense. So it's showing all my tracks. In this case, it pulled up to the mixer because I'm pretty sure it was the last thing last time I made an alternate window, I had it up on the mix screen, so I'd have the edit down here and the mix up on my bigger monitor. But what I really love about the way Luna does alternate windows is you can customize it. So I can, I could come into here and I can make this just a drum window. As you can see, my other window, this is still my full arrangement. This is still all my tracks. And then now I'm using Command tilde, the top left button, next to the one. It's called a tilde.
tilde, I don't know, tomato.
Exactly. So Command tilde, and that's now rotating between these two windows. So Command equals still works like when I'm inside this one window. Command equals is rotating between my edit screen and my mix screen, but now Command tilde is going between my two different workspaces. So there's a ton of powerful ways to set this up. This is just one example of isolating the tracks that you want to see. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll make it just I'll make this window just my buses, especially if I'm in a big mix session with like 100 tracks. It really helps to have a second window ready to go that is just my submasters or just my return effects, like kind of isolating it down. So this way I can have one big screen with a ton of stuff all going on and then quickly tab over to a more focused workspace. And similarly, you can get in here and you can customize, literally everything about this window. So what I did there is I took up here in the view, show high view windows. You can, all this stuff that's up here normally, the monitor section, the info section, the nav, the track, the focus browser, all that stuff, you can hide it. So you're literally just looking at faders and inserts, sends, etc. like that. And then yet again, I can just go back to this other window. And Luna it allows you, it's not just limited to 2.
Yeah, you can keep on going.
You can keep on going. You can get crazy with it. This is not, there's technically no limit to it, but
it's a lot of screen redrawing.
It's a lot of screen redrawing, exactly. So you'll see it. Your render meter may suffer a little bit if you try to have too many of these open and doing too many complex things at the same time. Key thing that I've gotten lost with before is how do I close out my alternate windows? Well, there's an X button up here, but how do I know the difference between my alternate windows and my main window? Your main window will not have an X and it will have the UA diamond on it. So this is kind of the big differentiator of like, how do I know where my main screen is? It's always going to be the one with the diamond on it, and then all the others without a diamond are just imposters. Just alternate windows.
I've seen people get themselves into a state where they're like, I don't see the diamond. I don't have the diamond. But yeah, it's
alternate windows. Yep.
Yep.
It's a really great little feature there. And I saw a question here from Barry saying he used save new version to create a different mix, but now he can't find his original session. What did you do wrong? You did nothing wrong, Barry. What you did is you created a new version. So every time you come in here and do save new version and say I just made this mix .1 better, Ben mix 1.2, save. So now I'm working on version 1.2. What I can do to go back is go into here to File, Open Session Version, and now here's a list of all of my versions, all the way back to when I started the session on Saturday at midnight. All good things happen on Saturday at midnight. But then you can come back here, and so I can come back to this morning, right before we started our show, office hours, and I can say open that version, and so now my session it'll freeze up here for a second, because what's doing is it's reloading the entire session, reloading it to the state that it was in when I created that version. So this is like the big thing. The big thing to remember is that the versions are saved when you save them, or their last known state. So when I created this version and moved to the next version, that's the version that I just pulled up here.
And the bigger the session, the longer it might take to go from one to the other. So, give them a second to load.
Exactly. Don't be like me. Don't start smashing the play button the minute you because it does, as you notice there, like you can even see it on my screen. I've got a very powerful machine. This is not that large of a session. It's still, there's a second or two where it's thinking about it, and then it pulls up the loading bar, and then once your session is fully reloaded in here, then go ahead and patiently press play. So hopefully that helps, Barry.
Paolo had a question about generating a reference tone inside of Luna.
Oh, one of our favorites.
Yeah.
Are you sharing your screen, Matt, or want me to?
No, my system's hosed right now. Sorry. You can pull yours up.
All good. All right. So test tones, man, I love the way they did test tones in Luna is really fun. So select an area, and correct. I'm going to try to remember. So Option Command Shift 3.
No, it's a Shift Option Control.
Shift Option Control
3.
It's a weird combo that you would. It's this weird like Velociraptor grip to get those 3. 1, 2, 3, and then the number 3, and then that will generate. This is what, a -20 test tone, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And of course, when you do it on a stereo track or you do it across multiple tracks, it'll do it in harmony for you, which is lovely.
I think it makes an F sharp major, apparently, like maxes out as an F sharp major. That's
funny.
What I heard.
Yeah. So there we're getting the third between the left and right channels. So this gives you the reference tone, and of course, if you do this on a mono track, which I have none of in my session right now, but here we go. Control Option Shift 3. Oops. That's the tone. That's the tone we're all expecting. So if you do need it to be louder or softer, you can come in here with clip gain, and you can just gain that up. And of course, you can double click on clip gain and tell it precisely how much you want it to come up or down. Yeah, that's how you quickly make this, and it's good for bleeping out curse words, etc. You can always just come in and go boop. Nice.
So, hey, Ben, while you're there, Matt was asking in the YouTube chat something about asking about markers. Is there a way for the markers to show up in the timeline box under the transport? One thing I have found is in the mix window, like when you go to the mix window, if you go to and show your mix overview, that guy right there, I have found that's a great workflow. It's not quite what Matt was asking about because there isn't a way to, the markers show up in the timeline in their own bar, but here in the mix window, this is a cool way of being in the mix window, but still being able to navigate and see in your universe view. I find that I use this quite a lot. I mean, I know it's pretty small, but there's enough where you can kind of get the gist of the song sections, and you can actually kind of see get some of your color coding come through there. So maybe that's helpful, Matt.
Yeah, because often you can see it in the arrangement, right? You can kind of see where mine, of course, this is just kind of a sketch of an idea so far. So it's, a lot of orange drum tracks, a couple, just like 3 or 4 tracks, but you can still see, okay, here's the top of my song. And then, I wonder where the chorus is. Oh, I bet it's this place that's more dense. Or
exactly.
You usually see it with the arrangement. But you don't see markers in there yet until somebody comes over here, fills out some feedback. Hit that feedback button. Let us know that you want to see that as well. Nice. What else we got? We're just knocking down some questions today.
Is there a way to bus a bus to a bus? Well said.
Well, is there a way? Yes.
Yeah, you could send from one bus to another bus, definitely.
Yep. So here I've got a drum bus. Let me come over here and, I'll show you guys. This will be a fun way to show you all the different ways to make buses while we're at it. So I've already put all my drums into a drum bus. So now by clicking on the output of that track, right now it's assigned to main. come over here to the routing button, hit plus, cool, drum, because we're gonna get more and more nested here. So now my drums are being outputted to my drum bus. Now my drum bus, I can come over here and do drum. And this can go on and on forever, but there's a shortcut that I haven't shown you guys yet. Or I mean, we've shown you guys, but in case you don't remember, Command Shift B is the create bus. This is my favorite way to create buses. Not just for the output, by the way. You can use this to create sends. So this pulls up a dialog that lets you easily create a bus and set up your settings for it all in one, and it automatically assigns the output. So now my drums are going to my drum, which is going to my drum, which is going to my drum bus, which is finally going to my main out. So this could be useful for running some things in parallel, for doing automation things. If you wanted to go absolutely insane with your summing and just stack it up and go nuts. Yeah. There's could be fun creative uses, but I know practically you may want to do like a kick bus into a drum bus, into an instrument bus, into a mix bus, for instance. Like I've had that in my templates before. So you're kind of doing like a focused subgroup, a little bit broader subgroup, an instrumental group, and then maybe a final mix bus before your main fader. So yeah, this all works, and Luna, as far as I know, delay compensates and keeps all these things happy and in time.
The only downside to that is that it does when you nest things like that, it does kill Luna's smart solo, because Luna can't solo backwards quite that many times. So typically, with a single bus arrangement, Luna will solo backwards through through your buses to the tracks. But if you nest them like this, then you're probably going to break that smart solo a little bit.
Yeah, let's put it to the test. Let's see. I soloed my drum. Hey. Still worked. Look at that.
Cool.
Good, nice.
Let's see if it works the other way though. Yep.
Cool.
Look at that. Go Luna.
I was gonna say I've run into scenarios where that broke. And Ben, just to be clear on that the Command Shift B workflow, it's important that I've seen people when the tracks that you have selected before doing Command Shift B.
Yes.
It's important that whatever you do in that menu will be applied to them. So if you set the selected outputs or from the selected sends, that's an important distinction there when you're doing that. So yeah, you'll notice that if you do that now, if you set that to send 1, then all of the tracks that are selected will have that assignment created for you when you hit create.
Yep. So there, I selected all my drums, and then Command Shift B, send 1, called it send it, and now we've got all my buses. All my buses are now feeding another bus via the send. It's getting out of control here, guys. This is
mayhem.
It's mayhem. It's complete chaos. This is where session versions are extremely important now. Since I'm in the office hours version of the session, I'll be able to get back to the version of the session I actually liked without all this crazy routing. It doesn't say phase coherent on the outputs when you feed a bus with a send from another bus, and those buses are assigned to hardware outputs. When you start messing with hardware outputs, you do want to be a little bit more careful about how broad or how deep you're sending. So for instance, if let me delete all of these. Back to something that is more reasonable. So if I were to use the output, say I was going out to my 2-bus, my analog summing here, and then if I also use a send out to there, this should stay phase accurate. However, if I were to bring that send over into a track instead of just the bus, that's where you may run into some issues, because this delay compensation for this track is going to be ahead of what's going through on the bus. So you just want to be kind of aware of going from either one place or the other. To me, seems to be a little bit more reliable for delay compensation. But yeah, when you start dealing with analog hardware outputs, that's where you do want to be a little bit more safe about how you're doing your routing. Whereas, if you're keeping everything inside the box, you can be a little bit more cowboy about it.
Michael had a good question about automation. how to select multiple automation markers at once and move them around.
Mm-hmm. Great question. So let me just make some more automation markers here real quick.
And this is something, while you're doing that, Ben, this is something I've noticed some people noticing the fact that the pencil tool does not, in its current implementation, and this is by design, if you want this to be different, make sure you hit the feedback button, but the pencil tool does not apply to group. It's not a group attribute. So automation, you'll notice if you have with our new track groups in version 1.1, if you select and drag multiple automation lines, it will adhere, it will follow the group logic, but the pencil tool will not. So you'll notice, Ben, if you, and double clicking to make breakpoints, that also doesn't apply to the group behavior.
Yep. But if I select and then lift,
it does. Yeah. And if you hold down control and do the pencil tool, that's on a per track basis right now, not following the group behavior. So that's the current implementation. That's not a bug. That's how it's been, it's been designed to this point. If that's not something, if you'd like it to behave a different way, then, that's something that you can share with the team via the feedback button.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
Drew for president. So down here, so a couple ways to deal. So let's say I wanted to move, so this is some freehand automation. If I wanted to come in here and adjust these up and down, that's gonna be difficult to do. So I can come in here, and by getting to the outside of those, you can see it's easy to pull them up and down all together. Drew, is there a way that I'm forgetting about how to select all these and raise them up?
No, I think, you just have to be in the, in that range. You might try going lower in the GUI, in your selection, or going above it possibly.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So it's just around the line.
All I'm getting is just it's either hand or not.
Yeah, I think in that case, with breakpoints that close together, you would need to get a few pixels outside of the one of those breakpoints to be able to grab it.
Yeah, you might be able to zoom in and grab one of the lines in between too.
Yeah, see there, you should be fine.
Yeah, there you go.
It's just a resolution thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, the trick here is, when I'm out here, I'm just going to be grabbing, an individual point. But like the guy said, if you zoom in, the key is to see the up down arrow. Then now I'm able to adjust those up and down since I'm getting into that break between 2 points. And that's kind of the key, as far as I've discovered, for adjusting automation in general, is getting to the in between points. So this is something I discovered this weekend. So notice, if I'm grabbing this up and down, it's moving all my automation points because nothing's really selected. There's nothing to say, hey, just move these ones up and down. So a quick way that I discovered to be able to select just the breakpoints you want is I'll put my playhead before these points and then hit tab. And tab is going to bring it right to where that edit point is, right to where I wrote that automation, which is just kind of random. So then what I'll do is tab to this one and then hit shift tab, which is now selecting to the next breakpoint. And I hit it twice because it went from the bottom one to the one right above it, which is happening instantly after. And now it's stretched all the way to this one. And now when I go up and down, you can see it's now moving that section that I had selected. And this works, of course, even for things that aren't straight across. I can come over here to this one. So this is where having the tab and shift tab to be able to select from one point to another point comes in handy.
And if you add in option, it'll go in reverse.
Yep, exactly. So shift option tab is now select the option tab is backwards, tabbing through things, and then adding shift to it starts selecting things. So that's how you can get precise about what you're selecting, and then be able to move automation points up and down as you like.
Vance asked on Facebook, how do you do tape stops? How you can do tape stops in Luna, and there is a funny little workaround for this, or if you use very speed. Yeah, if you use very speed, put your track in tempo mode, use it and set it to very speed, and then just do a massive tempo change using the arc tempo.
I bet that does work.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it does. It's interesting. I don't know if you could.
Yeah,
look it up real quick.
This would be fun. So So all my drum tracks are still in Razor Blade, or a few of them are Razor Blade, some are in Polyphonic.
Right. So long as they're in time, you want to put them in time mode.
Yep.
I'm sorry, tempo mode.
Tempo
sorry,
mode. Yep. Everything's in tempo because I recorded this into the track all synced up. And so now I come up here to my tempo ruler.
Make a selection. Click and drag to make a selection. Because you have to have a selection in order to see this. Okay. And then do the plus sign on your tempo change.
Let's just make it this. Let's do like
it's got to be pretty short. Yeah, it's got to be pretty short to give you that right effect.
All right,
and then hit the plus sign, and then change the shape. Set your end tempo to be like 5 BPMs.
Okay.
And then then there's the shape, and you hit apply. Yeah, you can change the shape.
I think for like a tape stop, it would be kind of like
something like that.
Very severe,
and then
like this.
And then hit apply.
And
then you'll see.
Let's find out. On solo.
So you did it over a couple bars. If you do it over like a really short period, it'll go brr,
Brr. It'll go what?
Yeah. It'll go brr.
Go brr.
Yes, I was about to say, make tempo go brr. So let's do a shorter selection here. That did sound hilarious though, as it was. It works.
It works.
The desired result has happened. Oh, that's so good.
So there you go, Vance. Yeah, hopefully that was fun.
All right, scrolling back through some questions. Arthur's asking, which UAD compressor would you use to control a highly dynamic instrument like piano, mallets, vibraphone, xylophone, as such? Drew, what would you use?
Boy, gosh, it depends on whether you want to do it cleanly or if you want to add some coloration at the same time. I mean, like, the 175, 176, they're a great tandem because, like, first of all, they're just amazing sounding compressors, but the 176 is super clean and hi-fi, and you can hammer stuff and like not lose the integrity. But and whereas the B is adds more coloration, actually sort of kind of tames the top end. So that could do it. If you're looking for transparency, if you're looking for coloration, Fairchild Mark II, man, Fairchild Mark II with the headroom screw pegged is like. Man, that thing, that's like a compressor and a Pultec in one plug-in. Like that plug-in is super vibey and tony and can, so it kind of depends on what the result is.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, yeah, exactly. It depends on what color you're going for, right? So, when it's a highly dynamic instrument, you got to ask yourself, do I want it to stay dynamic, or like what, with stuff like that, a lot of times it's the larger dynamics, right? The kind of like going from piano to forte, but you want to keep all the transients. That's for me, like I instantly would be pulling out like an optical compressor, something like an LA2A or an LA3A, because they're a little bit slower overall. They're a little bit simpler. They're just kind of about holding something generally in a spot. So yeah, I'd love LA2As for that. If I was going for something where I really wanted to accentuate more of the like transient of those instruments, so really bringing out the attack of a piano, 1176 all day. Like that's just go there, take the attack, make the attack open, so that way it's letting as much of the transient through as possible, bring the release all the way as short as possible, and that way you're clamping down on it as fast as possible, but still letting just enough transient through to make it sound punchier, and then letting it recover as fast as possible, so you're getting as much of the tone back from the instrument.
Yeah, the other thing to say there is that is you definitely shouldn't overlook is staged compression. Like don't ask one compressor to do it all. Like if you're when I hear highly dynamic, that leads me to believe that you're trying to rein something in, and that's gonna two compressors in series doing a little bit is always going to give you more options and be smoother than one compressor hammering it typically. So.
Yeah, and the LA2A and the 1176 kind of work great for that. LA2A will let the transient through but clamp down after. Then you can have the 1176 faster to clamp down the transient for a little more control.
There's a good question here from Alexander. If you use tab to transient on a group, are the transients detected like with the warp markers where it's the earliest transient on the close mic? I believe yes. That was what Connor showed us last week in the 1.1 reveal. Is when you're doing tab to transient, when you have say like multi-track drums, right? Your snare drum, the snare top mic probably hears it just a little bit before the overhead. So when you're doing tab to transient on a group, it's going to go to that first transient that it sees, and that's also where the warp marker is going to, by default, want to be placed, is on the first transient. So to keep, and then everything kind of snaps along with that to keep everything phase accurate. Nice. B Future's asking, can you give me a Neve summing that will work pretty good for an SM7B? Because I usually turn it up to like 80 and then down on the output, but it's a lot of preamp. Well, we got 2 SM7 users right here. What do you?
Yeah, and B Future was mentioning earlier that he was getting a lot of noise out of his SM7B too. And probably the reason is because you have the input gain really cranked and the output gain turned down to compensate. The input's kind of a dirtier, especially when you get up to 80. You're going to get a lot of color out of that input stage. So if you're looking for a cleaner sound, try backing off the input gain and then raising up the output gain, because that output gain is a lot cleaner than the input stage.
Yeah. And I find a lot of people, talk about the SM7B and needing a cloud lifter, no cloud lifter, all that business. To me, I find that a lot of people, that mic is so highly recommended by so many different people that sometimes people think, well, I'm supposed to be using that. And quite frankly, many times it's not the right mic for the job. It's like, so it's totally okay that if you're on an SM7B and it doesn't feel right, it's not gaining right, it's not picking up your voice right, like in the right way, it's totally okay to change a mic. It's totally okay. You don't have to be using that mic that you see everybody else using.
Such a same. I'm using a similar to that. I've got the Lauten, the LS208, which is a condenser microphone, so it's a little bit more. It's got a different sensitivity to it. The SM7 is this dynamic mic. It's like it's a souped up SM57. It does sound excellent, and it works really great for a lot of applications. Needs a lot of gain, as most people discover. Like it does use a lot to really pick up the volume. But yeah, what Matt mentioned. Input gain, you leave the output gain where it's at. Like leave that up at 0 unless you're trying to get a really saturated sound. That's really in my experience, the only time I pull the output gain down on a Neve preamp or the SSL or any of these preamps is if I really want to push into it and get lots of color. But the trade-off there is to get more color out of the preamp, you're having to put more input gain, which means more noise, more distortion. Like it's a little bit more of everything. So you got to season the taste.
Yeah, and that's it's a broadcast mic, so it's got a very small sweet spot. So if you have a singer who's moving around a lot, it's probably not a good mic, and you want to get super close to it. You typically, it's a mic that it wants you to be up close, to get that. Otherwise, it's gonna be a little thin, a little honky if you're too far away.
Exactly. Yeah. I see Arthur had a good follow-up asking about the compressors, about using 2 instances of the stressor, one in opto and one with the fast. Absolute, dude.
Sure.
You've read Dave Durr's mind. That was the whole idea behind the distressor when he created it, was to have this one of the most versatile, awesome sounding compressors ever made. So it can get fast like an 1176. It can be slow like a LA2A. So yeah, stacking one after the other would be a great technique to be able to have one working fast to grab the peaks, and then have one just working slower to grab the program material overall.
And what an awesome bot! It's just the hardware. That distressor. Have you notice? Are there distressor clones on the market? There's no distressor clones. Nobody. I think people open up that box, and I don't think they can figure out what it's doing. And he's a mad genius.
Genius. I see Alice is asking about the 30 hertz on the Pultec EQP1A. Ever used it?
Every day.
You use the 30 hertz?
Oh my God, yeah.
What?
Absolutely. Oh my God, yeah.
All right, Drew.
We've had this conversation before. Remember the Pultec thing, right? There was a that whole like Pultec trick, where you're the low band is both a peaking type filter and a shelving type filter. So you're cutting and boosting at the same frequency, but they're different, shapes, and they're different, band types. So yeah, 30 hertz, like it seems like, wow, I'm putting in a lot of 30 hertz, but it's a big, gentle curve, especially when counteracted by the attenuate circuit. So it's kind of like a way of, it's really more of a mid cut that blows up balloons up the bottom end. And I think we've talked about this doing a Pultec segment, so maybe we'll do that one day.
Yeah.
Come up with some examples, and we'll see some examples where 30 hertz on the Pultec sounds good.
Where 30 hertz actually, yeah. My default, I always bring it right up to 60 or 100. Like I always go a little bit higher. yeah,
it depends on if you want to deepen something. Like for me, I never just boost the 30. It's always in conjunction with the attenuate circuit, because what it does is the attenuate circuit's really a mid cut, even though it it says it's a low cut. It's really a mid cut. And then so you pushing the 30 up is it's like a reshaping. It's a classic Pultec curve where it pulls out some of the low mids to get rid of the mud, and then balloons up that big warm bottom end. So
yeah. See, one was asking if you can have Neve summing and master tape in Luna at the same time. Absolutely. So what's great about that is you can totally load those up at the same time. You can see here on this session, right over here by our faces, I've got my main fader. So I've got Neve summing up top, the ATR 102 down below, and then a couple of final inserts on that channel. Cool. One big thing to know about the master tape, the way it works here in Luna, is if you right click on it, there's an option to have it be pre or post fader. So this is super important, especially when you're using it on your master fader. If you have it in post fader mode, so with that green light that right next to pre turned off, this master tape, even though in the mixer window it's right here, it is now after my inserts and after this fader. So if you're coming into it, say like I am with a limiter, I'm now going to be driving it way, 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 way too hard because I've bumped the level up to a modern digital head 10 dB, a kind of a squashed final master. So on the main channel, I always recommend putting it in pre-fader mode. So now the signal is going through my Neve summing into my ATR 102, then into my final inserts, including a limiter that's bringing my overall level back up. However, when you use master tape on, say, like a subgroup, like for instance my drum group, you'll notice that by default it puts it as post fader. With the assumption here, the reason why these defaults are different between your main fader and your group tracks is the assumption here is that you're going to be operating closer to a normal, a reasonable level, let's say that, on your groups. You're going to be hanging out, in the sweet spot around 0 dB VU as judged by these meters. So now what this allows you to do is by having the tape after this fader is I can change how hard I'm hitting the tape by adjusting my fader, which is a great way to especially like make your choruses pop out a little bit. Just automate the drums a little bit. Just pop them up a dB or two in the chorus, and now you're driving the tape a little bit harder. You're driving the mix with a little bit more energy, and it's also driving that tape machine now with that extra energy, with it being post fader. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that even though it's here in the signal chain on your fader, it can be in two different places, but it can only be in one place at once. And they absolutely do work. They complement each other really, really well. Like being able to go, the goal here was to emulate what an analog workflow is, right? It's going through your console, through the summing bus, and then out into your master tape for the final mix.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I saw a question. Someone was asking about how to track out from MPC Live /X into Luna. Fantastic question, and I'll demonstrate this on Thursday. We're gonna do a deep dive show Thursday morning where we talk all about the 1.1 features. So that's one of the ones on last week's show. I showed how to kind of get a bunch of machines all working together, all staying in sync together in kind of more of a live context. But for tracking out beats using the MPC, I'll show you guys step by step how to do that Thursday. It takes a little bit longer to set up and go through, so it's a little too much to try to cover here this morning. But Thursday's show we will for sure touch on that, so don't miss that. Great. The overall change. Oh, I see one followed up here. The change in overall gain by the Neve summing, doesn't it mess up with the master tape? It doesn't mess it up, but you're totally correct. It is changing the gain structure around a little bit. So especially, I'm sure you guys have noticed when you go into low impedance mode on the Neve, the low impedance mode instantly adds, it's about 2 dB or so of gain. So what I find myself often doing is either leaving it in the high mode, or I really do like the sound of the low impedance mode. So I'll come into low impedance mode and then pull the trim down
And if you double click on that, you can enter numeric, precise numeric amounts there.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's really important to get your gain staging right going into the tape, because it cares about the input volume, not just the output volume. So I like kind of coming in here, trimming my Neve summing down a bit, but then more importantly, coming into my ATR 102. And when you click on, the show the I guess it's over here on the focus browser. So I'm now controlling the settings of my master tape over here. You can also come in and change your record level. The little red flags, these are kind of your default settings, the default gain structure to get a pretty clean transfer. But if you find yourself still coming in too hot, you can always just come in here and just turn the record knob down a little bit. And if you have these linked, like I do right now, you notice that as I move my record, my reproduce is compensating for it. So that way, again, it's trying to help you stay at unity gain as you're making these gain structure moves. But it'll quickly, I think by like 4 or 5, by around 5, it starts, your reproduce is now maxed out. So it's helpful to, again, use the trim on the Neve, use the record input thing here. And if you're still struggling, if everything is just too saturated, then you're going to have to go upstream and grab your faders and duck them down, which I will admit I had to do on a mix this weekend, or last weekend I had to do that on a mix where everything was just pushing everything a little too hard. And I was like, what? I was like trying to come in here and change the headroom controls. I was like, everything was on like basically nothing, and it was still a little too saturated. It was because I was not behaving myself, and I was coming in way too hot on all my buses. So going upstream and just doing, if you've already written automation, like I think I still have automation written for this drum track that I was showing off earlier. So let's say you find yourself like this, right? You've already written all your automation. You love how this is, but you're like, I'm coming in way too hot. This is where the trim mode will be your best friend. So by putting my drum track into trim mode, you notice how the fader turns golden yellow. That means that this is now a trim fader. So any of the moves that I make, you also notice it probably it reset itself to 0. So my trim was at 0 here. Now as I bring this down, it is bringing down. You won't see it reflected, but you're going to hear this. All this automation is now 4 dB quieter. So this is a good way that if you've kind of baked yourself into a corner, like I've done many a time, throwing your buses or some of your tracks into trim mode and then pulling those down preserves all of your automation moves, but just overall can help you change your gain structure around after you've already committed a bunch to a mix.
That's a good candidate for selection grouping too. Like that's what, we left selection grouping there even when we added full track groups, because, selection grouping is great for when you need that quick temporary group, like maybe you only select, your bus masters and so forth, and then you can adjust them quickly there. And then that's a good application for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, Ben, you can see the, as then the master tape section, you can expand them. If you hit the expand button over to the left, that guy, you can get to
good memory.
Can get to those. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally spaced on that. Yeah, so the expand function here, it's over here on the left hand side, and this works. You'll notice this is in multiple places. So like, you can expand your input section. You can expand your tape. For the inserts, you can have the big ones with the cool GUIs, or the little shorter ones to save some space. For your cues and your sends, you can get big faders.
And you've got global adjustments for that too, where it's all, it's all small, all big or something. Yeah, like right there, all large, all small.
Yep. It's a great way to quickly
shrink everything.
I sleep on this part of the interface all the time. This is a great way to like move around.
Yeah.
You can see you can even close. So if you want to just
everything,
really focus in, say, especially you're in a mix mode, right? I don't care about my inputs anymore. I'm done. I'm good on my inputs. So I can just totally hide those, and the same with the cues. If you're not messing with these things, you can close those sections of the mixer up to save yourself, kind of cleanse the palette in that sense.
I would do that, Ben, and now do fixed slots. Hit fixed slots. I love mixing like that sometimes, where like if it's early on in a mix and I want to kind of like see everything all at once, fixed slots with all that stuff hidden allows me to kind of drag, because then you can use the copy and paste for sends. You can drag and drop your plugins and stuff like that. So that's a cool mode to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you click the yellow dots next to each of the names too, you can actually hide them all together.
Oh yeah.
So you can really customize it.
Look at that.
So,
Look at
nothing-
I've completely cleaned
so
up my
clean.
mixer. It's
Yeah.
so clean, so clean, so fresh.
Minimalist Luna.
Exactly. If you're practicing your minimalism, this is the great way to really have no control over what you're doing.
Well, then you have to make your faders smaller too. So drag your faders down.
Yeah.
Drag your faders
I
down
know.
from the
Yep,
top.
You're right.
And
You're
push
right.
them down.
Yep. Small
There you go.
faders.
That's it.
This is my preferred view. My preferred view for mixing from now on.
Headless Luna.
Headless Luna. But yeah, we're all jokes aside. Hopefully, I don't know if we've actually shown this off here in office hours before, but your mix faders down here, as you notice when you select right on the middle bar, you can actually make them bigger or smaller. This is really helpful if you're on a smaller screen or on a laptop screen. Being able to just kind of shrink those down. Makes it a little bit more difficult to make fader moves, obviously, but if you're trying to save space and really focus, especially when you're in tracking mode, and you've got all this, you've got everything open. It really does help to kind of have your faders a little bit more out of the way to see more of what's happening in the top.
Yeah, I'm
part
not
of
sure
your
we've
mixer.
ever shown that. All the shows we've done, I don't think we might not have ever done that.
I've coached a couple of artists on it, like when we're setting up for shows, if they're on laptop
Yeah.
screens, and they're not really doing a lot of fader work, then it's a great way to get back a few pixels. See a question there. Is it possible to have more than 2 aux buses in ARM mode? Not at the moment. Limited to 2, and this is it's a feature of how console and Luna are working together, because they're actually in the background here you can see I've got my drum bus. My drum bus track here is selected for ARM operation at the moment. You'll notice here in console aux 1, the same plugins. It's actually it's a cool trick that Luna is doing in the background, where it's using the auxes built into console to give you the low latency bus workflow. But that does mean it's limited to 2. And if you want more, hit the feedback button. Let the guys know that you really want more than 2.
David had a question about reducing the amount of hiss he gets when he's using tape plugins, or tape extensions rather.
Mm-hmm.
Probably don't have you probably have the noise enabled in the tape extension, which you can disable in both Studer and Ampex, I believe.
Yep, correct. So for the Studer, again, click on the show button in the middle there. That'll open it up. It'll by default it'll open up like this, where you're seeing the tape reels, you're seeing the default tape settings. And you'll notice some of the presets do have noise enabled on them. So if you're like me and you're kind of allergic to noise, hit the open button. That pops open the top, and then here you'll find the button to turn on and off noise on the Studer, and similarly for the Ampex. Again, by default it's going to show you the main settings that you would see on top of an Ampex. Open up the top of the Ampex here, and you'll find a button here for noise, so that way you can turn on and off the noise, the realistic, true to life noise that is tape.
Analog dither,
right? Where is the MIDI channel map to implement control surfaces? I can't find it for transport controls and/or faders. I can find it for shape plugins. That's correct. So right now, the MIDI Moog and Shape both have MIDI controls hard-coded into them, so it sounds like you're able to find those, Scott. But MIDI control for faders or transport inside of Luna is not available yet. Keep on smashing the feedback button. Let us know how important control surface support is for you. The team, they're well aware of it. Trust me, they know it's important. But again, just adding more voices adds more fuel to the fire for them to get that feature in there for you guys. How does the channel trim automation work in Luna? So I mean, I guess the way I showed it is about as much as I think most people use trim. In theory, right, Drew, you can actually automate your trims as well.
Yeah, it's like another layer. Think of it as like an additional automation playlist on top of your current one.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea would be is like, Well, a good case example that you're doing right there, Ben, like let's say you like that move that you've done, but you just want more of it, right? So, and this would be something you would do in real time. So you could put that track in trim and touch, and then play the transport and then add or subtract to the previously existing stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
But trim automation doesn't show up as an automation lane that you can tweak.
No, yeah, you're just
No.
adding. It just keeps the fader from moving, right? So it's like otherwise you'd be chasing a moving fader, and this way it kind of parks the fader at the sweet spot. The other reason, your fader might be your automation level might be at minus 18 dB, which is in the more coarse part of the fader's taper's resolution. Whereas when it goes to trim mode, it goes right up to 0, which is the most sensitive portion of the fader taper. So by being in trim mode and having it park at 0, you can now add and subtract to previously existing automation data in that sweet spot while not having to chase a fader, so to speak.
Exactly. Jeff was asking, with 2 pan knobs on a stereo track, how much bleed is there from one channel into the other? Have had issues isolating the 2 sides. What is the spread Q? So not entirely sure what you mean by a spread Q, but as far as I know, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong here. So these are stereo. I've got stereo audio tracks on here. You'll see on the waveform. There's 2 2 channels of information here on my track. This pan pot controls the location of the left channel. This pan pot controls the location of the right channel. So when they're hard left and hard right like this, whatever is in the left channel of that recorded track is coming out my left. Whatever's on the right is coming out the right. As soon as you start moving these, now you're feeding a little bit of that right channel over into the left.
Right.
And so Luna follows the normal pan law of -3.
-3, yeah.
-3.
So does the Neve summing too. Neve summing's the same.
So when we say pan law is -3, what the only tapering that really occurs on a pan pot is so when you pull it into the middle, this is actually down 3 dB from where it was on the side. And if I remember, it's a smooth transition. It's not like the minute you go to the middle, it's now down 3. It smoothly rotates it. And this is because of the apparent volume would change. If we didn't have the -3 pan law and you pan something from the right down to the middle, it would actually just get louder.
Right.
But yeah, each one of these are fully controlling that channel of audio. So as soon as if you pan them both over here to the left, now I've got both channels of my audio track that I recorded are both coming out the left speaker. So yeah, as soon as you move these, it's going to start bleeding from one side to the other, but that's kind of the purpose of.
And maybe what they're saying is that maybe it's the source. You also have to consider the source. If the source is, even though you've panned hard left and right, if the source material has, bleed between the 2 channels, and an easy way to find that out, by the way, is just do convert to mono, right? If you took a stereo track,
that's what I was about to say too.
Yeah. Yeah, if you did a stereo track and did convert to mono, it would turn it into 2 mono tracks, and then you could clearly hear exactly what's in the left channel, exactly what's in the right channel, with no impact by that panning. If that's maybe that's what the issue they're having is.
Yeah, exactly. That was gonna be my recommendation. Is like, yeah, if you're having trouble if for some reason you're having trouble isolating with a stereo track, it's up here in the track menu, track convert to mono. And that'll take a stereo track, convert it into 2 mono tracks. And conversely, you can take 2 mono tracks like I have here and convert them into stereo. But of course, I lost my settings. Those were good settings. There we go. Undo. Nice. See, Ram Music's. Have you done a presentation of pushing Logic Pro X live loop functionality or virtual drummer real time into Luna for songwriters building tracks in their workflow? I saw the Ableton one. Yeah, so Ableton works for synchronizing with Luna because it receives MIDI beat clock. Unfortunately, Logic Pro, Pro Tools,
Studio One,
yeah. They're like Luna, where they only send out MIDI beat clock. They're not candidates to receive it. So unfortunately, that wouldn't work quite as you expect it. There's some tricks that you could do to be able to feed audio out of Logic and bring it into Luna. If you wanted to have, treat it like a drummer and have it kind of operating independently. But unfortunately, the playheads won't synchronize like we're able to do with Ableton or with MPCs or Machine or sequencers that accept MIDI beat clock.
And you can do the opposite. You can use Luna to host Luna instruments and play, the Mini Moog and play Shape, or you can play them live and transmit the audio into other DAWs. As Ben said, the transports aren't locked, and they're not synced, but you can use Luna as a host. That's a way of getting, if you want to buy the Mini Moog and you want to, or Ravel, or for example, and use them in other DAWs, you can do that.
Yep. Tone was asking, will Luna be compatible with VEP, Vienna Ensemble Pro? I'm not familiar with that one. Is that, if it shows up as a virtual instrument, it should be able to come in, but it'll only be in stereo. I think if you're looking for the multi-out, because I think that, I haven't used VEP for very long, like over 10 years. So I'm not entirely sure how it's working at this moment. If it's a standalone program and it's able to send dedicated outputs, there's some tricks you can pull with virtual channels and sending out multiple virtual channels to bring it into Luna. If it's a plugin that you load up as an instrument inside of Luna, it's going to be limited to just the stereo implementation at the moment. Hit the feedback though on that for sure. I saw 5.7. He had an incredible memory that I promised I was going to show off, answer machine questions. I didn't see any specific machine questions pop up in the chat today, but again, along with the tracking out from the MPC, I'll show off the how to synchronize machine on our deep dive show. We're saving a lot of content for our Thursday show. We want to kind of put this information all in one place for you guys. So there's a reference video that you guys can come back to and look up all the answers to synchronizing, to track groups, to session versions. We want to put them all in one place for you guys. So that way it's very easy to find rather than kind of dispersed across a bunch of different office hours episodes. So be sure to check out Thursday's show where I 100% promise money back guarantee synchronizing your MPC, tracking it out, synchronizing your machine, and bringing that stuff in as well. So yeah, absolutely, guys. Yeah, it works with VEP, but not multi-timbral. It's confirmed. Nice. Awesome. Cool, guys. Well, we're on the right past over an hour here. Were there any lingering questions that I missed that are important to get to today? Or otherwise, we'll like I said, we'll jump back in on Thursday and really kind of walk you guys through all these features even more.
Yeah, we hit all the questions I saw. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, in that case, let me stop sharing my screen so you guys can see our beautiful faces. As I tell you one more time, Thursday, deep dive, 1.1 features, 10 a.m. We'll be back here. Bring some popcorn, bring some good questions, but we've got some incredible amount of content to be able to transmit for you guys there. But tomorrow at 10 a.m., we've got the final mix session with Fab starting at 10 a.m. We'll be taking the song Every Man that we've been recording with Lewis in a remote capacity, bringing that session in, doing the final mix down on it. I'm really looking forward to that because it's one of my favorite things to do is watch Fab mix. It's a really cool process to see and hear how he's able to take something that already sounds good. Like we've been listening to it in its raw form for weeks now. So I don't know about you guys, but like I might have demo-itis for the song. I love how it sounds already. So it's be really interesting to see how he takes it from what we've been enjoying and listening to now for months to a final mix and what those final touches are going to be. So tune in for the dramatic conclusion of Tales from the Switch tomorrow at 10 a.m. But yeah, guys, everyone, thank you so much. Great questions today. Really fun hanging out with all you guys and answering your Luna questions. Glad to see you guys all making so much music and so much awesome stuff happening here inside of Luna, and always hitting the feedback button and letting us know how you're getting along. It's fun over the weekend. Over the last week, we've been some of the devs have been noting some of the fun, positive feedback points that you guys have been sharing as well, which is really, really great to see how you guys are getting along with it, especially with these new big features that they put a lot of time and effort into.
Yeah, feel free to hit the feedback button and just tell everybody, tell the team how you feel, and that it can be positive. It can just be, it doesn't have to be a bug, Exactly. It can just say hey and just say hello and ask them how they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So with that, guys, everybody have a great rest of your Monday, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
See you guys. you.